I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to West Point, Mississippi. Hunting season.
Around the corner.
Here. It's
yeah.
I love this time of year.
It's probably open in South Carolina, isn't it?
It's been open there
been
for a
open.
while. Yeah. Mississippi's about to get started here.
Yeah, October 1st.
Next week.
You got your eye on one? Mm-mm. You got your eye on two?
Mm-mm.
How about 3?
No.
I know somebody who has their eye
I know
on
somebody's
one.
got an eye on it too. Yeah. I won't.
I bet
I won't look towards that end of the table.
I bet our guest has his eye.
Oh yeah, he's got his eye on several of them.
Yep.
Yeah, let me get this conversation pointed that direction if,
There
if
you
we
go.
can. So just looking around the room, we got Mac over here going to fact check us. So Mac, we're going to need you today. We're going to need some good questions. We've got the old original.
Got the OG Cleve in the house.
Yeah, on the board. Dudley's in here, looking good.
Looking at TikTok.
Lanny, how was the football games? The Friday night football game. I got to know.
It was kind of rough.
How are you enjoying being a parent?
The swim meet was really good. So
You enjoy being a football parent?
I enjoy being a parent. Period.
Do you holler out
Good
advice?
answer.
Yeah. No, I love being a part of my kids' lives, man. Whatever they're doing. So if it's football, we're playing football, baby.
Are you
You
hollering?
just hoping they'll get. I don't want them to get hurt.
So y'all are playing like the 8-on-8 thing?
Yeah, and we only have 8. So.
Okay.
Yeah, can't let anybody get hurt.
Yeah, nobody could get hurt. That's
All right, Toxie's down there. He finally put on his headset, so he looks official.
He looks kind of perturbed at you.
And then, well, he does that all the time. I'm used to that.
I'm focused, and that's not a normal thing. So
Yeah,
just
there you go.
And look on our guest couch. We've had this guy so many times. He really needs no introduction.
he's got something on, Bobby. I'm telling you,
Man.
something's going on.
But we've got Kenny Thompson,
In the house.
Jackson, Tennessee. He's known for planting food plots, and he's known for being able to. He's got a really good green thumb, and especially with clover. But he tells me he knows more about what we're going to talk about today than anything else that he does.
When I think about the tagline, it's not a passion, it's an obsession. I think about Kenny Thompson.
Do you really?
Because he doesn't do anything half-assed.
No, he
I
doesn't.
guess I shouldn't say that. Halfway. Yeah, he doesn't. So
Either one.
No,
Either one.
he gets deep into it. So, Kenny, welcome. Glad you're
once
here.
again, back on in between the turkeys.
Glad to be back.
Look, we got a couple of things we need to do, Kenny, before we get started. One of them, Lanny,
What?
country roots.
Man, this is a good-looking pattern.
Y'all, look, if you hadn't seen it, you can go to mosseyoak.com. You can see there's a
Yeah.
couple of pictures of
Couple
it.
pictures of it.
But it is a fantastic
I remember the first time Bobby saw some samples we did
Yeah.
internally working on it, and he was like, "Oh my gosh,
Yes.
I think that might be my favorite thing."
If you like Bottomland, you're going to love this pattern.
Yeah, and you know what it does? I'll say this: as we worked on it, I was seeing it unfold, and of course, it's a whole bunch of people. It's not like, oh
no.
I said this the other day. It's like, oh my gosh, Toxie Hayes, the great camo inventor. I am not a camo inventor.
Not anymore.
No, I never was. I mean,
Right.
it's just I did develop the first thing, but it's all about developing a brand for everybody. That happens to be at the
Nature on fabric.
yeah, that's the
what it's
tip of the
about.
spear for us is, Mossy Oak Bottomland and the patterns. But what I was getting at is it is so reminiscent to me of original tree stand.
Yeah.
It's
that's
like
true.
the new age version of original tree stand. And it's kind of a simpler is better.
Yeah.
And everybody, maybe sometimes I think maybe we have too, not saying or even judging others, but it seems like maybe they missed a point on some of the stuff they were doing, And I think this one we really hit the nail on the head.
It looks great.
Country
in the
Roots.
woods. Country Roots.
It's a good one. I guarantee I put our stake our claim on this one. It's a good one.
It's
So,
a good
guys,
one.
if you want to see it, you can just go to Walmart.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one other thing for
Walmart.
people to look in today's world too. There's so much of a tidal wave of bottomland popularity that just keeps building. And don't forget, one of the most effective things we ever offered and people did, and Lanny was a big part of that back in the day where he worked and took pictures and promoted, was the mix and match philosophy. And this really mixes well with bottomland, either original or new bottomland, either one of them. So,
I do nothing but mix and match.
Yeah.
I love it.
especially in the spring, but also in both seasons.
I do.
You know?
I
I bet you Kenny mixes and matches.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so apparel available at Walmart. Go check it out there. Other
Yeah.
dealers too, so check them out.
Yeah, they've got a lot of really cool stuff.
They
It's
do.
offered in a lot of different garments.
Yes, it is.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
And so, Laney, I think there's also there's some Moultrie products there that
Yeah.
Moultrie sponsoring the podcast. The guys need to go check
Yep.
out the Feed Hub.
Yeah.
That's a very cool, kind of technology breakthrough for people and their feeders and managing them.
Walmart's doing a really good job of making it all from Mackinac in there, looking at the feed and seed stuff, and you can legitimately walk through there and get rigged out in quality gear and get out there and
I'd
get
say
some
this
hunting.
for them. It's always been so important to us to be there, even in today's world where you can pick up your phone and like someone says, who's the biggest retailer in the world? Well, someone holds up their phone. That's like there probably is,
Right.
Because you order from all the different retailers through your phone now. But it's so important to still have places for sportsmen to walk into
No doubt
and
about
touch
it.
it. And they have more widespread, especially rural or adjacent to rural distribution than any retailer in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for that reason, it's very important to be there because we are, clearly, I'll just say it for the world. Intention is to be an inclusive brand and be there for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one thing we worked hard to stay there and work on super good quality products for people too. So we can be available to everyone as much as possible.
Yep.
Well, hats
Very
off.
important to me.
Yep.
Well said, and hats off to the team that created Country Roots because it is fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Yep.
Yep. It
Well,
is.
we got a great internal team led by Mr. Bill, Larry Moore still. Also, they anchor that for us.
Kenny, you've got a bow shop up there, Top Flight Archery, and you started telling us one day about you had been working on bows and and like you're almost like a guy that takes a stock vehicle and then puts all these aftermarket parts.
He's a
on.
modder.
Yeah, he's a modder.
Yeah, is that what that's called?
Yeah. He's a modifier.
So kind of give us a little background. What are you doing, and why have you gotten so? How have you gotten so good at this?
Well, it's kind of like Lanny said a while ago. If I want to do it, get a passion for it, I'm the guy. I'm a very detailed oriented guy, so I've got to know how it works. I got to know why it's there. I got to know every aspect of it. So, on the premise of this whole conversation, I base all this back to I've always been a lifelong bow hunter. I killed my first deer ever when I was 8 years old with a bow. I had a great dad and brother that was mentor and taught me, put me in the right place, and all I had to do was make a shot that day. But I've been doing it, over 40 years now, and bow hunting is a passion, a deep passion of mine. And so back in 2007, I lost a deer of a lifetime in Illinois, and after that event, I made absolutely the perfect shot that I could have put on the animal, and I lost it. And it bothered me enough that instead of just chalking it up to a bow hunting event, or like a lot of people do, and say, well,
It happens.
That was unacceptable to me. And I put a fire in me right then that it'll never happen again. No matter what I got to buy, what I got to do, what I got to build, what I got to make. So I literally dove in and started learning every detail of arrows, broadheads, bows that I could imagine. And I've always tinkered and bow hunted. I mean, set my own, a lot of stuff up for my own, but I've never got to that detail. And it based on one thing. And it all boiled down to instead of listening to opinions, I depending on facts. And so on the premise of this whole conversation, and I may rattle some cages today, and if I do, I apologize, but I'm just going to talk facts, because opinions is where the gray area starts.
Well, that's what we got Mac for. Mac's over
Yeah.
he's going to fact check.
And so everything that I want to talk about today is either firsthand trial, tribulations, heartache, good, bad, and ugly, as you can say. So, but since that day when I started really diving in and studying how they work, why they work, what works good with this and what doesn't, and broadheads especially, over the years I just learned more and more. Now, y'all know how devoted and how much time I've put into my Plots Plus business and my wildlife side. And
Oh, yeah.
how many hundreds of thousands of hours. And So around 2017, I had one of my lifelong mentors retiring from a bow shop, and he's always pushed me to do one and really kind of influenced me, and he taught me into doing it. And I've been, shooting Matthews bows in particular since they come out in early '92, so I was really familiar with that brand, and I've shot about every one and built every one they've ever had over the years. But when I started diving in 17 and opened a bow shop, of course, I can't do it like anybody else. I've got to have my little niche. Well, early on, I figured out real quick that I wanted to look at everything that I didn't like about any bow shop that I'd ever been in and eliminate it. And at the time, we had no fluctuation with components like we do today. So we were really limited on what I like to build back then. So now the evolution of the last 5 or 6 years with some of this equipment has evolved to now we have the flexibility to build exactly what every bow needs. So to be a true custom shop, the bow not only has to fit the shooter, but the arrows have to fit the bow, the broadheads, every down to what knock and what vane and weight, and so the bows are easy. These Matthews, they build themselves. So the actual broadhead arrow combination that's the best fit is where I had to spend my time. So I had a really good friend of mine, Chris, that back in 2018, he said, look, I want to know. I want to know what the best vane, I want to know what the best arrow, I want to know what the best components. So let's me and you dive in. We're going to put time in. We dove in with every component of every manufacturer out there. We spent 2.5 months just dove in and started every combination you can possibly think of. And we come out of that with a lot of data, a lot. And so I started thinking about, well, what can I do with this? So I started literally just logging it and looking back at numbers. And we're not just going by numbers that we read on a chronograph, but we're going by penetration. We're going by noise. We're going by flight. We're going by deflection. We're going by every component of measurement possible. We were trying to measure it.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation, redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done, making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Moultrie was first in feeders since 1979 and is the leader in total game management. They're taking feeding to another level with the new Ranch Series line of durable and versatile feeders, perfect for both wildlife and domestic livestock. So Dudley, you can feed your goats. Whether you're a deer hunter, a hobby farmer, a land manager, or a rancher, Moultrie has you covered with several kit options, including a rotating auger, broadcast, or a gravity kit. And these feeders are 300 or 450 pounds. They're big feeders. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount.
So once we come out of that system, it taught me not only what to look for and how to match the perfect arrow broadhead build to the bow, but it also taught me how what not to use. And early on, I learned there is a lot more out there that is, for me, unusable than usable. And most setups, and I don't want to rattle any cages, step on toes. Most setups are wrong on their arrow broadhead combination for their bow. And
I can believe that.
At the end of the day, it's all about efficiency. So when I started being able to figure out how to measure energy retention downrange is when the game changed. Because everybody wants to measure their bow on a chronograph at 3 feet. And they say, well, my bow's shooting 315 or 310, and they think that's acceptable. Well, I don't know about y'all. I hadn't shot too many deer at 3 feet. Mm-mm. Most of mine are at 20, 30, 40 yards. I want to know what the speed is there. So early on when I started figuring out, all right, so if I have an arrow that may be 310 off the chrono right here, or whatever speed it is, what's it doing at 30 yards, 40 yards? And then the light bulb went off, and we started figuring out what worked and what doesn't. So when you look at the physics side of this, and you break down, you eliminate the brands, you eliminate the name, everything about it, and you basically go energy source, vehicle to carry the energy, and some kind of tip on that vehicle to do the work on whatever medium that you're shooting, whether it's a target, a deer, or whatever. Then you start simplifying. And what I started noticing was that on a lot of these, any bow, and not necessarily a Matthews, but any bow, you start looking at how that energy is leaving the bow, transferred to that arrow or the vehicle to carry it. And I know we've all seen the videos where they look like a spaghetti noodle. Mm-hmm. All right. The lighter the arrow, or an arrow that's not spined correctly, those peaks and valleys are really high, really low. And so the higher and lower those are, the longer they're going to go down range. That's dissipating energy. So when we started measuring foot-pounds of energy off the bow compared to 20, 30, 40 yards, I started realizing, all right, I'm almost going to use 40 because that's kind of the cap of where I like to try to shoot a deer. But so a lot of these setups that have a lot of peaks and valleys on their, arrows doing that, we're losing tremendous amount of energy further down range. But the more that I could control that, and the quicker that it was over with, the more we were retaining. So to give you one of the first setups that we really hit on, I had a guy that was shooting a very powerful bow come in with a light arrow. He was shooting like 30-inch draw, 75 pounds. He had about a 390 grain arrow, and he was shooting around 315. And chest swole up.
But it was way under spined.
Well, the spine of the arrow was correct, but it was underweighted. It wasn't balanced. So what was happening was, and at the time, my bow was shooting around 265. I have a 28.5-inch draw. I think I was pulling about 65 pounds. And he's at 315. I'm at 265 on speed. And so I said, we got to talking. And I was like, well, in my opinion, he asked me. So if you ask, I'm going to be honest about it. I said, I think you have a really good target setup, and I think you have a really good setup to hunt turkeys with a mechanical head. But for deer hunting, I think it's pretty much the total opposite of what you need to be shooting. Mm-hmm. Because number one, we're not going to build any kind of archery equipment to be faster than a deer ducking, not even a crossbow. So, and we actually calculated that measurement. It's 656 feet a second at 15 yards. There's not even a crossbow that'll do that. Mm-hmm. So we're
that's
not
how fast you would have to shoot
for the deer not to duck at 15 yards. So that's not going to happen.
No.
So let's get the speed side of it is where everybody's getting wrapped up, and it's one of the way down the list. I only really use speed to help me calculate the energy. You're not going to outduck a deer, so that doesn't impact what I'm going to buy or how I'm going to build an arrow, other than the end result. It's one of the measurements I need, but that's it. So whenever we started measuring those, comparing those, we realized that, off the bow, he was smoking me. But at 40 yards, he dropped from 315 to 211, and I maintained at 231 from 265. Not only that, I had an arrow that was weighing over 100 grains more, hitting at 20 more feet a second at 40 yards.
Way more kinetic energy.
So then we started playing with, all right, well, what about, where does that change? So we started backing it up, and it was at 13 yards is where it got even. So he had me to the 13-yard mark. Then the heavier arrow or the balanced arrow took over.
What kind of chronograph y'all shooting at 40 yards?
Well, I do have a disclaimer. You hit my chrono, you're going to buy me another one. But we've got various kinds we shoot. But we started measuring. So when we hit that test, and we started looking at it, I was like, okay, well, why? I got to know why. Mm-hmm. So we dove in, and it boiled down to not only the right spine, Dudley. That's something that I have found through a lot of these arrow charts that are wrong. And a lot of your spine has to do more with the length and how much FOC, just as much as the thickness or what poundage you're shooting off the bow. So most of these charts are a general chart. Mm-hmm. To really fine tune, you have to run the numbers to know.
So there's a really big issue that goes along with that too, is I think is probably even more important than the loss of speed through the inefficiency you're talking about, and that is the inconsistency in flight you're going to get from air to air, or in any kind of like conditions of wind, or just release a little long because you're under pressure up there, standing on one leg, leaning over, looking between two limbs. I mean, there's just such a fragility to that aeroflight in something oscillating that much, as opposed to something rock solid, smooth. You know, like I've always said, it's like you said, really simple. In theory, you want to throw every ounce of energy generated from that bow through the absolute micrometer dead center of that air shaft. Mm-hmm. Now, that's impossible to do almost, but it's really that simple, isn't it? And you back up. What you did now, you backed up from there to things that didn't. And what I think it gets, I have to say, and I'm sure that you're not the first person ever to know this, but it's worth mentioning because I don't hear it much at all, is how big of a difference that does make downrange. Because I don't hear that talked about much at all.
So we actually started measuring that toxin. So I got to the point where every bow that comes in the shop, I want to know how much energy retention we have from start to finish. So I look at every setup. I had 2 this morning come in before I drove down. And most setups that I see, no matter if it's a youth bow, women's bow, adult bow, long draw, short draw, high poundage, low poundage, most are only retaining 40 to 45% of the energy created at 40 yards. Most. We're maintaining, averaging 88 to 92. I'm doubling it
That's huge.
because of the arrow build and the broadhead build.
Interesting.
Balance.
It's funny because
It's all about balance. He just said the key, right?
Yeah, that
Balance.
makes
Big
sense.
time. The only way you could possibly, that's an amazing number. There's no way.
Now,
Crazy balance he's achieved.
We measure every bow that comes in the shop, every one, and I log it. I'm a numbers guy, so and it's facts. I can argue with numbers. I can say, hey, here it is. Look at there's the books.
Figures don't lie, but liars figure.
That's
That's one of those old sayings I heard from my dad.
Yeah. But so now that we figured out what we need, well, it's easy to say, well, just build heavy arrows. Well, that's not the answer because one very, very important thing. First off, let's say like if I'm just going to shoot hogs at 15 yards, well, yeah, I'll just go build you a 700 grain arrow, go out there, blow through the shoulders, and be done with it. But we're not. We may be elk hunting next week, Dudley. We may be whitetail hunting in open fields. We may be going on a mule deer hunt. So trajectory is something that you have to pay attention to. Now, there is a balance to keep that flat trajectory and still have a balanced arrow with enough momentum. That's your number one measurement, not speed, not kinetic energy. All of that is a measurement to get to momentum. Momentum is what's going to push that broadhead through that animal.
So let me ask you this then. In it seems to me it would be, this is all just a physics discussion, that the shorter the arrow shaft, then actually, and then shorter the cycle of the string and bow, then the less critical it would be. I mean, it seems like, in converse, I'll say to help understand, the longer the cycle of the string and release, and the longer the arrow shaft sinks, it would be even more critical to have it perfectly
Absolutely.
tuned and spined and everything.
Absolutely.
Because there's more. There's just, obviously, if anything else is wrong, it's going to get accentuated every inch longer that is. Whether it's, the draw length, the brace height, everything, So, all I'm getting at, though, if you actually go to the degree that you go to, seems like the best thing you'd ever shoot is a longer draw and a longer arrow, but only if it's really tuned. Is that right?
Exactly. So, and in that world, whatever draw length we are. It's kind of like shoe size. Whatever the good Lord makes us is what we are.
Right.
We have to fit that to you. But once we figure out your draw length, then that arrow build is going to be specific to that person, that bow, that build. But what Togsie's saying is that the longer the draw, the more room for error there can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to generating energy, draw length trumps poundage every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a man with a 30-inch draw at 60 pounds is going to create more energy than a man with a 27 draw at 75 pounds.
Yeah, I'm going to throw that in there when I said that this will shorten people's draw length a little. I'm a big believer in this, but I'm yielding you on every topic about bows. I've always told people when you measure your draw length, be sure and set your bow up about a ½ inch shorter than your draw length. And that I've seen when I set mine up perfectly to my draw length, I tend to get it's easier to get sloppy, especially if you've been holding for too long and all that stuff. So maybe it's a 1/4 inch, but it seems like to me you want to have the bow just slightly smaller, shorter than your draw length. Is that?
Yeah, I never go longer. Ever.
Right.
You never
right,
want to
right.
overextend yourself.
Right.
I would rather make it up on the arrow and keep you comfortable, but you also got to take in consideration we have a D-loop to consider.
Right.
We have winter clothes when we're hunting to consider.
Yes.
So yes, we will. If we err on any side, it's going to be a 1/4 to a ½ inch short. And be honest with you, most measurements are not hitting on a ½ inch increment.
Right.
They're hitting on a 27 3/4. We go 27.5.
Right.
And let the comfortability be there versus trying to generate another 5 feet a second. So I don't emphasize on speed whatsoever. I emphasize on whatever we have within that window, we build it. Now, doing this over the last so many years, we've got enough data points now that I can pretty much run through the numbers in my head on just about every setup, on what shaft, what arrow, what vein. Now, within the scope of that, now we get into availability, because not only am I looking for durability and straightness, now I've got to look for the weight to be right on the GPI, or the grains per inch, to allow me to put the weight on that arrow where it needs to be. So when I get ready to build an arrow for a particular setup, once I have the length of that arrow, then we can determine spine by how much I know I'm going to be putting on the front. So everything I do on the front of arrows is based on 100 grain field tip, broadheads, such as that. After that, then I have to look at, I build it from the FOC numbers back. So every arrow build we do is going to be between 16.3 and 16.8. So that's giving me a variance of a 0.5% window. And basically FOC, the front of center, is the distance of your midpoint to your balance point, the percentage of that versus the length of the whole arrow. So if I'm at 16%, where Dudley's balancing it right now, that arrow right there is 16.5.
That's the sweet spot that you're going for?
That is the sweet spot on getting to the most efficiency out of that arrow. Going back to this.
Yeah, to where how it waves
I control
in the air.
this. The way that I control that is with FOC.
And he's showing his hand oscillating for y'all.
Yes. So
that are listening.
Yeah, I'm controlling those peaks and valleys. Now, this is our vertical variance in our arrow. Our vertical variance, which is up and down with the flex of the arrow, we're controlling with FOC. Now, FOC and spine. For instance, if I have let's say that I'm on the borderline on the spine chart, I always go heavier on the spine, because you really need to step up a notch with the higher FOC you go, because it's going to cause more flex. Make sense?
There's more weight in the front.
Exactly. Think about when you're throwing darts at a dartboard; they're really weighted on the front. Well, if they were balanced and we didn't have that weight on the front, your accuracy is not going to be as well. It's not going to be as good. So that 16.3 to 16.5, it's not too heavy, but it's not too light that I'm losing vertical variance. Okay. Now, when we talk about vertical variance, that's all going to be in that oscillation of coming off and look those peaks and valleys. Now, when we talk about what about horizontal? Well, that's going to either go back to the tune on the bow, the rest being in the right place, or how your arrows are clocked. Now, when you clock an arrow, naturally off of a bow, the arrow is going to want to turn in one direction or the other, naturally. So let's just say we didn't have any veins or feathers. It's naturally going to want to go one way or the other. And on a bow with a string that has a clockwise twist, that is twisted to the right, if the bow is set right and the rest is set right, you're always going to clock to the left. I don't care if it's right-handed, left-handed.
So the arrow will spin
to the left.
To the left.
Yes. So that means we need to fletch to the left. Now,
when you say, just for the purpose of, when you say twisting right, you mean as the string goes up.
Yeah. So
as you look at it going up, because you look at it going down. Then
so like if you had a raw bowstring and before you twist it, you start twisting, you turn it clockwise.
Right.
That's a right.
But you're like looking going from top to bottom,
exactly.
twisting to the right.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. Now, if it has, and there's only one manufacturer that I know of that twists counterclockwise. Those will clock to the right, but it's only one manufacturer.
Okay,
And
so
I
I've
would-
always shot right wing, and I guess I've been doing it wrong.
Yep. So what's happening with your arrow is that if now I had a guy in the shop a while back that said, "I think you're wrong. Mine clocks to the right." And I said, "Well, I hadn't seen your bow." He's on the phone. He said, "I hadn't seen your bow, but I would just about bet you it's either out of time or your rest is not centered, zeroes out." And I said, "It's the only reason that it wouldn't clock that way." So he come in, sure enough, his bottom cam was a 1/4 inch out of time, and somebody kicked his rest way over trying to get broadhead tuning done. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So that's why his was clocking to the right, and he had been fletching wrong for years. So once we straightened his bow out, we clocked it again, it went left. So once we figured that out, so now everything we do in the shop, because every string manufacturer I deal with does a clockwise, we're all left. Now, and it's one of the many discrepancies that I found in the whole gamut of products out there is because all of your pre-fletch stuff, almost every manufacturer, and I'm not brand specific on anything arrow-wise, I keep those doors open because I need that flexibility. Most of them are right offset, and it's wrong. It'll fit that one brand of string, but it won't fit anything else. So what happens, Dudley, is that arrow comes off, and it's wanting left. Now,
But it
remember-
has to go right.
Now, so for the first 10 or 15 feet, it's kind of knuckleballing, and then the right will take over. So now not only
I
are
watched
we,
that in slow mo, and it's amazing how it's like chaos that all of a sudden just whoop, goes into.
Yeah, it takes it
gets
that long.
smooth,
And,
but
you know-
you've already lost all that energy.
There you go.
Waiting on it to smooth out.
you
So,
go.
like with traditional archers shooting recurves and stuff, they don't have a true center shot like we do with a compound. So your arrows have to be more. They have to have less spine or be more bendy.
Exactly.
So when you let go of that string, it'll bend around
Exactly.
the bow.
Exactly.
But you don't, with compounds, that it makes it a lot easier to.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is way two different worlds. The whole emphasis on energy retention for a traditional archer is going to be a total different mindset than what we're doing here. But remember, we talked about vertical movement with our arrows earlier. Now we're adding to it with the knuckleball effect on a wrong spine because we've clocked wrong. But now, if we have it going in the left like it should, and we get that spin off the bow like it's supposed to be, now we are controlling our horizontal movement.
So for years, I would get a new bow, and I would, okay, so I've got my rest already on there. I set an arrow on it. And what I would do is I look at it with this eyes, and I look at the strings, and I line the strings up exactly how they are on the cam. And then I look down my arrow, and I would move my sight over to precisely be in tune with the way the string was off the cams, and so it should be dead center. And probably 4 out of 5 of those
Shot left.
would shot left.
Shoot left.
Yeah.
Yep.
Reason it's
And he's
kind of-
right. And then I would end up bringing it back. And then they shot pretty good, but it was always things that would be happen like, okay, I get a box of 6 arrows, and even if I'm shooting a mechanical versus, standard, I would always tune them, and whatever. But it would be just like one arrow that just would not shoot with a field point or anything. And it was so frustrating. I was like having to make sure, and that's what, even given all this knowledge you could impart on people, I would still tell everybody, go through everything and shoot everything just to see, even if there's no rhyme or reason, make sure. Because I could not understand why, first of all, until I heard you talk about that, why wouldn't me perfectly tuning that?
because the cable
Shoot
goes-
perfectly, yeah. Now I know with what you said. And then, why would there be inconsistencies when you've tried everything else to control everything the same? And I don't know, it's just some arrows would not shoot, didn't matter what you did.
I think
So-
some of the.
Go ahead.
And I threw them out,
I
honestly.
think some of the older carbon arrows are not. They're not spined the same all the way around the circumference of the arrow because there may be like a seam in it. So if your nocks are, you can twist your knock, and you probably could have twisted your knock and gotten it
Could
to
have.
where it
That's
liked
what-
the spine. But
Yeah, I would
So-
do that. I have done that before in trying to tune one. I had an arrow roller thing that I would do and see which way, and then
Yeah,
I would bend it a little bit, and then sometimes you could twist the knock.
Well,
You're
an
right.
easy way to do that. Every arrow is going to have a spine.
A variation. in
Yeah.
spine.
Now, somebody like Victory marks their spine alignment. The new UV arrows are spine aligned. Easton, a lot of these brands don't. But what we do is we float them. So you can take every arrow shaft bare and float it. The spine's going to go down, so you mark the side out of the water and just fletch your odd
That
vein
just
on the
makes
bottom
too
side.
much sense.
So we float.
Why didn't
we
I
float,
think of that?
We float everything.
Come on, Dudley.
Yeah.
You're not
Okay,
thinking about
so
archery enough.
all these questions are starting to appear in my mind now.
Now, also, real quick,
Obviously,
Ruh-roh.
obviously, proper bow, a properly tuned bow and a properly tuned arrow is of utmost importance with this system.
Yes.
So, what are some of the things you do? I mean, you've already talked about tuning, but do you use paper tuning or bare shaft tuning? Or do you prefer
yes.
one over the other?
Yeah. So, real quick, and when we start on the tuning side, it all starts at your rest.
Okay.
Now, number one, on a 2-cam bow, we have to make sure everything's in time. That's the basis of everything. But when we put the rest on there, and this is one thing that I am a stickler on, is I don't move my rest once I get it zeroed out, period. If I need to tune, I'm tuning the bow to the rest, not the rest of the bow. Now, so what I love about these QADs that we run through the shop is they actually have a micro tune alignment where I can see where zero is. So when I bolt that rest on, and let's just say I line up my horizontal with my burger button and I get everything zeroed, and then I left and right we zero it. And going back to what Toxie said a while ago, on the left and right on a lot of modern bows today, we can take the string and the cam alignment and we can put it right down the middle of the grip and the string stop.
Right.
Now, you're never going to be able to, I'm going to say never, let me back up. Most of the time, your pin can't be in line with that because of the cable guard pulling to the right. So you compensate that cable guard, because what that's going to do is put a little bit of cam lean top and bottom, and to make up for that, you kick the pin to the left. We're not detuning the bow. We're not messing with the tune. This is just where our pin is, because in a perfect world, we'd be shooting through our hand.
Right. Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
can't. So when we come down, when you put that cable guard to have room for the arrow to travel, the way that you make up for that on your sight in process is I will put the pin on a true neutral grip. You're going to be about 2 pin widths of the actual fiber to the left of the string. And that will put you dead center starting. And now, from there, if anybody, like somebody could hand me their bow and I could just look down the string and see where their pin is on the string, and I can tell you what kind of grip they have. I can tell you if they've got a lot of heel pressure, left, right, inside, outside, up and down. I can look at their sight alignment against their string cam, and I can tell you, I don't even know, you can hand me your bow, and I can say, well, you got a lot of low left heel pressure, or low right heel pressure if it's over to the right. So that pin alignment is in accordance to that. But that also ties into the tune on the rest. So I zero that rest out. Now from there, all I have to do is find where the D-loop goes. So we level the bow, we put an arrow in with a leveler on it, run it across, and I go just a heavy bubble up, knock high. Because when that bow comes to full draw, you're going to have just a slight, depending on the manufacturer, some a little bit more than others, but if you go to a heavy bubble when you're at full draw, that's going to put you dead level. Right. Now, from there, my bow should be theoretically perfectly zeroed out.
Right.
Which is going to give me the most efficiency and energy retention.
So I remember Cuz used to say, now he was shooting, you got to remember, he was shooting a super long bow, like 48-inch axle to axle, finger shooter, cafe tab. You know, he was even competing in the fingers division all those years ago too. And when he was looking, when his arrow would just a tiny bit tear up, just a tiny bit, he was actually happiest, because in those old days of kind of archaic stuff, in his mind, he was just telling me that's safer, but it's not going to bump my wrist at all. But he said only very, very slightly.
He's right.
So I don't know. That sounds kind of like what you're saying.
Exactly right. So now into modern day fall away rest, we don't have to contend with that as much as he did.
Right. Yes, correct.
That is where we can kind of dodge that bullet that he had to contend with. But in that setup that he had, he is 100% right. You would always go knock high just a smidge to clear that rest.
That's what he did.
Because if you brought it down and you had any interference, the back of that arrow, remember, we got more weight on the front, so there's more influence on the back with no weight.
Right.
So it would hit that rest like he's talking about. He's absolutely right. But on today's bows where we zero that out, theoretically, we ought to be perfect, right?
Yeah, you could, yes,
Now,
today, yeah.
let's just say, well, number one, on the bear shaft tuning, I don't do that because I'm not hunting with a bear shaft. I'm going to tune with my fletchings. I'm going to tune just like I'm hunting or whatever we're doing with that setup.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to shoot it through paper. And from there, let's just say, hypothetically, I have a left tear, right tear. Most folks are fixing to start cranking on that rest. Well, you may correct it with the rest, but you're losing energy. I'm not going to do one thing that's going to take any percentage of energy away that I don't have to.
So you want it to stay as center shot as
It's going to
possible.
stay 0-0.
Yeah.
And how I'm going to do it, and instead of moving,
So you're setting the rest based on the string,
I'm setting the rest 0-0 up and down, left and right based on the string and cams.
but you did say you're, depending on the twist, you would have it just slightly one side or the other?
No, I'm gonna leave that rest 0.
Oh, 0-2, okay, when you're looking down it with, okay.
Yes.
all
So
right.
if you look at that bow right there, it's set on 0-0. But let's say I have a left or right tear.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of moving the rest, I'm moving the cam and the string.
Right.
And the way I'm going to do that is on Matthews has a top hat system where I can pull the axle, and it's both of those bushings on either side of the cam, top and bottom, have to equal 0.175 thousandths. Now, from the factory, most of them are a 100 on one side and a 75, and on the bottom it may be like a 90 and an 85. Well, I can swap them, and I can literally shift the cam over to get that left tear, right tear out without ever moving the rest. And then I've got other top hats of different variance thicknesses that I could just slip them in, and I can literally micro tune my cams by 10 thousandths at a time to get that bow with a perfect tear and never move the rest.
Just a fraction of a millimeter, even
Nope.
just moving that cam.
I'm moving the cam, but
Yeah.
I'm not moving that rest.
So, and left and right on your cam.
Exactly. I'll shift the cams and the strings,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah,
not.
so anytime you move the rest left or right, you are going to increase the wobble of that arrow.
Exactly.
As soon
And
as
what
it's
happens
released.
is when you take that wobble, you're depending on your fletching to correct it.
Correct.
Well, that's drag. That's
Yeah.
taking energy away. Again, energy retention is my goal.
So I'm over here fact checking. I'm not Mike, but
So
I snuck his bow. He had it in here with him, and he is exactly right. He has got this thing. If you line up your string with the cams, it is in the dead center of that rest.
Is the pins just on the left side?
Hold on.
So are you having to do that
That
a
makes
lot?
sense.
Everybody
Yeah, but I
comes
mean,
in?
you're talking about. I mean, it's on. Your pins are on the string, just barely visible there. But yeah, it's not like they're outside.
So
of it.
I
Yeah.
traditionally have a little bit of inside right pressure on the
Right.
bottom side.
Right.
So if you look at a grip on a bow, it's the most important aspect for your accuracy because it's the only place we're touching it. So if you look at a grip, I look at it like a rectangle that I'm looking at face on. And the four corners of that, I'm looking at 25% pressure. I look at it the same way that I look at all four limbs on the cams, 25% equal pressure.
Well, for our viewing audience, it is exactly as he says it is. Not that I've doubted him, but it was
Well-
just fascinating. I've looked at this so many times.
that's the first rest I've seen that you can watch Sports Center on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a TV in the side of the
This
rest.
thing is for real.
But it's energy retention. It all starts with the tune.
Okay.
Now, it's
What's
not-
next?
Arrows.
But are you tuning every bow that comes out of the box, or some of them, or and what percentage of them fit somebody right
on
off?
I'm a Matthews dealer, so on the Matthews side, I'm gonna say 8 out of 10 out of the box hit the money. 2 of them we may have to play with the top hats left and right. On the 33 bows, the longer bows, we have to do probably 6 out of 10. But on the 29 and a half lifts that we have this year, 8 out of 10 hit the money out of the box. We zero them out, make sure the D-loop's in the right place, we get a bullet hole first shot.
That bow, as we look at it right there, with all that, like Max said, it looks like you could watch ESPN while you're in the tree. What's that thing sell for?
The lifts right now, bare bow retail at $13.49. The 33s are $100 higher, $14.49.
But that with all those accessories you got on there, what is
Yeah,
that?
we can't get this one for
Well,
$1,300. Look at him smiling.
I mean, like we've talked about this a couple weeks ago when he was here. He's replaced a lot of the components with like titanium to get the weight down, and
Bobby, it's just north of $10. No, it's that is about that setup's a little bit north of $4K.
What's the as far as the draw poundage? What is the sweet spot? Because I mean, I know you got the numbers on it.
Well, I'm going to base those numbers on what your sweet spot is. So I'm going to hit that 260, or speed-wise. That was the other measurement that we were talking about, Dudley. So when I hit that 16.3 to 16.5, 16.8 FOC, then my next one is what I'm thinking speed-wise. And for me, what I've seen the most optimal killing speed is about 265 to 280. So I'm going to build that arrow. Mac, if your draw length is 28 and you want to pull 60 pounds comfortably, you're going to end up between 265, 280 at around 16.3, 16.5. Whatever the weight of the arrow it is. So I'm going to, and whatever shaft we use, pretty much we've got enough data to know what shaft to use. The more energy retention that we can keep, the more versatility I have on what shaft I can use, the more components that'll open that door.
So I know we talked earlier. What do you think about arrows that don't pass through?
If you
Depends on what you hit.
this is one of my commandments, that if I were to put commandments outside of our great 10 that the Lord give us, I'm going to say, number one commandment, if you don't have a pass-through on an animal, you had an equipment failure, period. Other than a turkey. I want the arrow to stay in a turkey. But if it does not stay, if it stays in that animal, you need to reevaluate your setup.
Let's get into that.
Well,
Let's get into the arrow.
Yeah, because I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there's one thing Trump said is like just the reason for all of this stuff he just talked about is accuracy.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean certainly if it doesn't get there, but there are vast differences in what it runs into in different parts of the deer.
On a white-tailed deer,
Yes,
I
sir.
tell every one of my customers that use this system, I want you to put them through the shoulders. I want you to shoot them long ways. I don't care about angles. I don't care about bone.
Shoot
You're
them
going
pouring
through
towards
it.
you.
I don't care. You're going through it. With that setup, with that broadhead, with that arrow, you're going through it. And I don't care what you're shooting. It's going through
There
it.
you have
So
it.
you aim for that ball and socket right there
I
in the
break them
shoulder.
down. I break them down.
man.
And so how many deer have you sent this broadhead through? Or not necessarily this one. Didn't you say you had one that
I've done roughly, in the last 7 years, I've roughly done 3,500 setups. I know of pushing 800 kills out of those setups. Every one has been recovered. Everyone's been a pass through. No losses. 100%.
Man, I wish we could fact check.
That's
them
a
all.
hell of a statement. Matt.
I tell you what, and here's another thing. Of those setups, I've never, ever had anybody want to go back. I've never had nobody complain.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never had nobody say that they didn't like it, ever.
I'll buy that one.
so
There's too much human error involved to be perfect. That's hard to figure.
We have had 0 losses on animals with this arrow broadhead. Now, bow-wise,
Even gut shot.
I don't care. Shoot 'em.
I know that's what Bobby
Yeah, but
likes to
there's-
do.
It got to be
Now-
a lot of people that I mean, I get so shook up.
You get
They-
toe
they
up
know-
bow hunting.
Everything
Everybody
I know,
does.
I forget.
Now let's back up. The number one priority on this, and the number one reason for this, is the broadhead, and it's the most important facet of this whole system. So when anybody comes in the shop that's new and they say, "Okay, I've got X amount of dollars. Here's my budget," the first thing we go is go get the broadheads. I literally, they are the most important. Number 2 is your arrow, and number 3 is your energy source of the bow.
So hang on one second. Let's back up to where Mac. I think Mac was going, and we got off on it a little bit. But is there a poundage range that if a guy comes in your store and he says, "Well, I can pull 58 pounds comfortably,"
Oh, that's
are
nothing.
you like, okay, that's great.
We're
We
gonna-
can build some. But what is that range? If he's 55 to 65 pounds, somewhere in there, you're good.
If I'm going to say, I'm going to go by facts. I'm not going to interject opinion on this. I'm going to interject facts. Here's a couple of examples I can tell you recently. Last time I was here, I mentioned I killed that deer in Missouri from the ground. It kind of got me more excited than ever. On the same trip, one of my best friends was with me, Jeff, shot the biggest absolute bodied whitetail I've ever seen in my life. And I've been fortunate to kill them in Canada, Iowa, everywhere. I've killed whitetails every size you can imagine. It was the absolute biggest bodied whitetail I've ever seen.
What do you weigh?
We didn't get to weigh him. The scales broke on the deer before. I'm going to guess that deer was low 300s live weight, but it was so long and broad, 7.5-year-old monarch. I know my deer weighed around 280 live weight, and it made mine look like a fawn. And he shot this deer through the shoulders, 32 yards, with that arrow and that broadhead that's on the table, and he was pulling 48 pounds on a 28.5-inch draw.
Wow.
Jeff, it
How
has
many pounds?
48. And he shot through both shoulders of that. Well, not only that, the arrow went through the deer, stuck in the ground 18 inches behind it, broke. The deer went 40 feet and fell over dead. So that's one example. Another example is I have a really good friend of mine, a really big bow hunter. His daughter at the time was about 9 years old. She was dying to go hunting. We had her in a little Mission Raddick. She was a 19-inch draw and a 28 pounds is all she could do. And he said, man, I can't wait till she gets a little bigger. And I said, I believe I could build her one. I said, let me run the numbers. So I built her a short little gold tip 500, and I put a bunch of steel on the front, weighted the front, got the numbers right, and she started shooting, and she was deadly accurate to 20 yards. And I said, well, she really don't need to shoot past 20 yards on this, because she's only creating about 38, 40 pounds of energy here. And that kind of goes back to it of thinking, well, how much energy does it take to go through a deer? Nobody's asked these questions.
Right.
So I said, keep her under 20. Don't let her shoot it in the shoulder. See what happens. We put her a ground blind up on our little corn trick. We brushed it in. I cut the corn really close on purpose on that food plot where she could, when they got in there, they'd be within range. And she killed 2 does that season and had a pass-through on both of them.
Wow.
Iron wheel wide. I think the wide one is down there on the table.
The Furminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting, from start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Furminator does the rest. Check it out at thefurminator.com.
To answer your question, I want to find out what's comfortable for you and then build that arrow to suit it. But I've had multiple people 40, 45 pounds shooting through deer.
So so how do you judge your poundage? So okay, we shot earlier. I can pull back a 60 pound. I can pull 60 pounds. Do I hold it for 2 minutes? Can I hold it for 4 minutes? I mean, what is the comfortable? Like, what do you look for on that?
I just look for being able to be comfortable and hold it steady. I'm not looking for a measurement of how long you can hold it, or, I've always grew up hearing that if you could sit in a chair and hold your feet up off the ground and draw it, it was fine. But I've had guys do that, and it still be too much.
It's hard to draw. It's so different when you sit down.
Absolutely.
Mac, why don't you just go ahead and draw back, and we'll just count how long you hold it.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I don't know how long I can hold it.
I'm looking for basically I'm wanting the feedback of when you're, say, shooting your bow or sighting your bow, and how calm your pen is. If you're all over the place and you're telling me your pen is moving on the, within the range of the whole target, not just the kill zone, we may need to back it down and get you comfortable. I would rather you be comfortable at a lower poundage and be more accurate, like Toxie said, than I had trying to overwhelm yourself and not be accurate. Because
I always thought it was more about being able just to put that bow right and pull straight back, not aim up. But so you're not the least amount of movement to get drawn back.
I mean, there's certain situations where we're hunting, whether in a ground blind or maybe some of the saddle hunters now that may have to do that. But really and truly, I want to draw my bow using leverage, where I'm using both arms, and then that leverage and shooting repetitions over the summer is going to strengthen me to be able on that one shot to be able to hold it straight and draw it right back. But having to do that on a daily basis, you're probably going to do some damage to your shoulders and elbows that you don't have to do.
So when you're practicing,
I'm not sky drawing, but I'm bending both arms and I'm separating equally to where I can use the leverage of the bow to help me draw, and I'm inadvertently building back muscles that are going to help me in that one situation. But to do that type of draw day in, day out, you're probably going to do some pretty good damage to your shoulders and elbows at some point over years.
Yeah, I get we talked about with one of our other guys on that's almost like a physical therapist for bow hunters and trainer. But the tennis elbow thing comes up. I shoot too much. That 10 in my elbow. But you have to draw. if you try to draw anywhere near facing, you can't. I mean, you lose a ton. You got it's pretty much a 90-degree to the target.
It is.
Move.
It is.
And I mean, to me, I'd rather bend further than 90% to get something than try to sky draw. Doesn't seem to help me much.
Yeah. If I'm relying on one arm to pull, I'm probably going to be hurting myself long term. Where I would rather use two and separate.
Man, there's no today's bows. Man,
it's a whole different ball game.
You
I was thinking about that.
Really,
Overdraws
if you're struggling, you've got to come down. So you cannot. There's no reason to be.
But again, if
cranked up so much to be struggling.
Yeah, I would rather spend the time, Mac. I'd rather spend the time building a right arrow for you to fit that and be comfortable. Remember, this is supposed to be fun. Let's keep it fun. I don't care if you're 48, 58, or 88. Let's just keep it fun. And whatever poundage you are. We can build an arrow and a combination that you can hunt with.
Tox, you remember back years ago, like Jerry Simmons kind of pioneered having that really heavy broad.
195, I killed my first buck with one. Simmons Interceptor.
And a 165.
It looked like you're throwing a hatchet out.
Sure did.
But he did, and he believed in it. So, the other thing is he's talking about a lot of this today is like technical physics of archery and data and so forth. And but then the philosophy I always loved was, and the reason I say that, you're kind of marrying these two things, and it was the Winsel brothers. I consider them pioneers, maybe besides Fred Bear and a few others. Mm-hmm. And good gosh, they did some unbelievable things. They're still around too. But he said, and this is 30 years ago, he was talking, and bows are starting to really shoot faster, and people are taking a lot further shots and stuff. He's like, it kind of saddens me that the youth today have confused archery and bow hunting. Mm-hmm. And it's like, archery and bow hunting, same thing. No, that's two totally different things. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, archery is how far you can be from the target and hit the bullseye. Bow hunting is how close you can get yourself to the critter and not take a bad shot. And so I was just thinking that, Kenny's with this is taking the best of the best modern technology, but he's not preaching, hey, with my setup, you can shoot them at 100 yards. He's preaching like, with my setup, you will make almost no mistakes except your own at 30 and 40 yards or so. And so I just love the philosophy of the Winsels. I think it holds true today. Mm-hmm. And people are just like with turkey loads. I mean, they can kill them at a long ways, but then they stretch you too far. And even at that range, you can kill them and stuff. You're going to make more errors. You're going to wound more. You're going to mess up more. And
you're going to wound more that are standing off to the side. Too.
Yes, correct. So, I mean, what distance can you be so consistent at? And that's what Kenny's teaching us today, is marrying, the greatest of technology with the philosophy of the Winsels and bow hunting.
My philosophy is this. I want the only variance in that tree stand making that shot at that deer to be me.
That's right, exactly. I was going to say, if it's my fault, then it's my fault.
The bow has to be perfect, just like when you're sighting in a gun, or everything has got to be perfect equipment-wise. In other words, if a machine were shooting that bow, we would literally put every arrow in the same hole. I can't do that.
That's right.
There's enough variance in me that I don't need anything else to be a discrepancy on killing that deer. Now, the more I practice, just like anything else, what you spend your time doing, you're going to be good at. So if I put in hours a day shooting, I'm going to be better at it. But the equipment has to be perfect because I'm not. And
go back to what I said though. The most important thing about bow hunting is beating the critter first. And what the last thing you need is for your equipment to let you down. Once you go to the hardest part by far is getting one standing there in good bow range.
So let's go back, Dudley. You asked about the arrow. You want to dive into that? And
I'm looking at these this crazy helical on these fletchings.
Yeah, what percent twist is that?
This 5-degree left.
This collar up front.
Man, it looks more. Why does it look so much more radical than 5? Because I've shot 6 before, but it was on a bigger fletching.
Yeah, probably a longer fletching.
Probably shorter too. Could be a little bit shorter.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Basically, when you dive into the arrow, now we get into the bread and butter of it. Okay, so let's go back to the physics part of this, where we had energy source, vehicle, and a mechanism on the front to cut. Mm-hmm. The more resistance that the broadhead has, the more momentum you're going to rob and take a chance on not coming through that animal.
Right.
So when you start talking about resistance on a broadhead, what's going to cause that? Another one of my kind of sayings is that there are more wounded deer with mechanical broadheads than are recovered. I truly believe that.
Well, I saw some stats, the NDA the other day, and I prepared for this, not knowing you were going to make that comment, but they had some stats that was showing recovery rates on fixed broadheads was 82.3, and there were 1,100 people that were surveyed, so it's statistically significant.
Yeah,
I would
with
say.
1,000 people.
And then on mechanicals, it was 90.7
Recovered?
recovered.
I don't believe.
I would.
Only thing you
I
got
would
to say,
question-
accuracy is accuracy. I mean,
Yeah, I would.
you know,
Okay, let's get into that. What makes a fence head not accurate?
not being in tune. Absolutely not everything not being in balance and
All right,
tune.
broadhead tuning. How many people you know ever had to, or you ever heard of it?
I've heard of it.
I did it
I
for
shot
years
my
before we got.
broadheads,
Yeah.
you know.
I think a
was it.
lot of people don't want to do it just mainly because they don't know, or
why
they're.
does somebody have to do it? Why would it hit different?
It's
Well,
a different
it's
it's not-
altogether.
It's like wings,
Yeah.
though, like on a
Well,
plane.
because if you don't have it tuned and do the things you're talking about, then it's going to do something different every time.
100 grains is 100 grains, in my opinion. So back in 07, one of the things I dove into was why I had to do it. And I thought, there's something wrong. It's either the arrow part of the broadhead taking too much air off the fletching and it can't recover, kind of like what Bobby said, or it's an imbalanced head, or it's the wrong arrow, or it's an improperly tuned bow. Let's get down. So we know the bow's perfect. We know the arrow's perfect. Let's get into the broadhead. Best example I have happened several months ago. I had and at the point now, this is the only broadhead I sell in the store. That's how much I believe in them. It's that you come to my place, you're going to shoot an iron wheel, or you're going to have to go somewhere else. He come in and was bucking on buying them. He'd been shooting this particular brand fixed head forever. And I had built him some arrows. He had bought a bow several months earlier, and he called me, Kenny, something wrong with this bow. I was like, well, what is it? He's like, I don't know. Broadheads they're everywhere. I said, well, come over. We'll look at it. So the first thing I did, I shot his arrow through paper, perfect. I shot outside, perfect. We tested everything we could test, perfect. We put his broadheads on, and it looked like a carnival ride. I thought a couple of them were going to come back at us. They were so bad. So testing-wise, I keep an iron wheel on the corner of the counter for everybody to shoot in the range if they want to test them. So I throwed the test one on, and it flew like the field point, out to 60 yards, just money. We put his back on everywhere. So I said, well, it's in the broadhead. Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out together. So we started taking the broadheads apart and weighing components. And his blades were literally 18 to 20 grains difference in some blades. So it was almost like on a 3-blade broadhead, he had a counterweight. Mm-hmm. Now, they were all 100 grains, but when we started really diving into each one, it would be 1 or 2 blades weighing whole significantly different than the others. So when we started mismatching the components to get them equal, we helped the flight, but then he come out with a 92 grain, 107 grain, 105 grain. He was all over the place. So he finally just wadded the whole bunch up, threw them in the garbage can, went over and bought some iron wheels, and he ain't checked up since. So most of the time, it's like Toxie said, it's in the broadhead itself, whether it's the cut size taking too much air off the fletching, or it's the imbalance of it. Ferrules weighing different, blades weighing different. There's a lot of variance there. There's one thing about these. They are 100% going to fly over your field points. 3,500 setups. I've never had to change it. We've never had a broadhead team, ever.
And no moving parts.
No.
Well, Mac, the one time we needed you to fact check something, you got up and
Still
went
holding
about it.
this thing.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to say, I'm kind of with Kenny that if I was going to run an arrow through the bony part of a shoulder, I wouldn't want a mechanical. I know most of my buddies that shoot mechanicals, they're aiming for that behind the shoulder
Yeah,
area.
that's what I've done. I've shoot a mechanical head, and I have never had a bad experience with it.
All right. So let's back up. I get this, and we're gonna get comments on this. We are.
Oh, yeah,
we're gonna
for sure.
I'm gonna get beat up on this. I know I am, but here's my take on it. Remember, energy retention is my number one goal. How much energy you think we're robbing off of that mechanical to open, to deploy, to do whatever it's got to do, and still not have enough resistance to go through the hide, to through the bone. Now, but a lot of this also goes back to the quality of metal. Mm-hmm. So when you look at a broadhead, if we're going to buy a good knife, we want a good knife. We got to fillet an elk. We want to cut up an elk. We want good steel, right? We want good metal. Well, most broadheads, if you ask the manufacturer what kind of metal they're made of, they can't tell you because it's a pot metal. Can't be sharpened. These iron wheels are A2 steel. A2, pretty much the only thing that it's used for other than these is making tooling to cut other steel. It's that hard. They stay sharp. They're durable. Just don't lose them. I mean, he's going to back them up.
Yeah,
you can't hurt them.
Just to describe these, they look like a lot of the 2-blade heads you see on the market. They come with bleeders, but they're very, very heavy duty looking.
You talked about shooting them behind the shoulder.
I've got a Tonto tip on the front.
Yes. If you look at a deer's vitals, and I've never been okay with it. Never. Since I was a kid, I've never been shoot them behind the shoulder. Shoot them. Why? All the good stuff's behind the shoulder. 10% of the kill zone is behind the shoulder.
You're talking about, some people think behind the shoulder is like where the ribs and lungs are, but you're talking about behind those shoulder bones.
Yes.
Up further forward.
Yes.
Yeah, the big, I guess, whatever point is not the shoulder blade, because that's a pretty good piece of bone in a lot of things. Mechanicals will usually stop, but it's the actual bone, like the femur, the heavy hair, and the ball where there's bones and that big thick ball is. I mean, I've seen bullets completely expand and evaporate, not go any deeper than hitting that part. So that's just one narrow piece going up. It's pretty much the leg bone. All the other stuff in the shoulder, it's different in depth, but most of the shoulder blade is not that dense and not that deep. So that's a different thing, and that's what's hiding most of your vitals.
I want to get in there where the good stuff is.
Yeah,
sure. I don't want to be limited.
What you got to remember, that's why though, to the defense of the average bow hunter, a slightly quartering away shot opens way more of that up to you than, and is also why, in my experience, I've gotten. Most of my bad experiences are trying to cheat a slight quartering to me, which, from what you're saying, is
That's
true.
my favorite.
Is that quartering to you? But not if you're shooting slightly behind the shoulders.
Right. Well, so
you almost, even though you think you can get to it, I mean, your room for error is so minor, and especially if you're lucky, you'll get one side of the lung or one lung at that angle.
But so, using this heavy duty equipment that's tuned properly, you're saying that you're able to make a more ethical shot where someone maybe with mechanicals are going to have to wait for that deer to start quartering away. I have heard a lot of folks are taking more, what used to be considered a nominal shot because they trust their gear and they know it's going to penetrate.
I had a guy last week kill an elk out in Colorado, one of my customers, and he's new to this kind of system and this setup. And he got out there and he finally got on a bull, and we laugh about it now. He told me, he said, Kenny, I was drawing back and he was coming in quartering to me, and he said, it was like you was on my shoulder saying, put it on the shoulder and let it go. Put it on the shoulder and don't worry about angles. Don't worry about it. And he said, the last thing I said to myself, Kenny, you better dang well be right. And he said, I put it on the point of that ball of that front shoulder, and he said it just literally disappeared like he wasn't even there. He said it went in and come out of his back ham, went through him 30 yards and stuck in an aspen tree 30 yards behind him and split it. He said he literally flinched. He didn't even know he was hit. He flinched like a horsefly bit him or something, kind of hopped, looked around, blood pouring out of him, said he didn't make it 10 feet and fell over dead. We laugh about it now because he said, what he was saying. But I want to be able to have more opportunity than what some of the equipment will allow that says you have to have. In other words, that deer I lost in 07, I waited till I had him quartering away. I waited until everything was perfect, a 22-yard shot, and I put that arrow exactly where I was supposed to put it. And it went through behind the shoulder and lodged in the opposite shoulder. That deer, 2 weeks later, was still running around chasing a doe with my arrow hanging out of him, with dried blood coming out of him, and he ended up getting killed by a gun hunter on opening morning of shotgun season. And I got to go see the deer, get my arrow back, and look at and examine what happened. I double lunged him, nicked the diaphragm, did not get the heart, but it didn't kill him.
Wait a minute. Wait, double lunged him?
I double lunged him, diaphragm. Arrow was still lodged in the opposite shoulder. He was spitting blood 2 weeks later. A buck of a lifetime. And I said right there, if I had been shooting something that if I could have went through that other side and got a complete pass through, I believe I'd have recovered that animal. That deer changed my bow hunting life, because that's why I'm as extreme as I am now. I'm not a heavy arrow guy. I'm not a light arrow guy. I'm a balanced arrow guy for the setup that's going to give me the optimal penetration and energy retention downrange.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Physics.
So I want to make sure we point out, people listen to this. You got to know your equipment. You got to know your limitations. I saw a sticker on a car today that it said "Know your limitations," and it had a picture of a duck, and it had six marks beside it. It had deer, and it had 3. It had turkeys, and it had 2, and it got down to women, and it had 1 on there. I thought it was a pretty good little thing. But guys, hitting that shoulder, that ball joint Toxie's talking about, is a reality for shooting some lighter equipment. You want to stay away from that. That's what we've been taught. That's what we've learned the hard way through.
That's opinions.
And I mean, let's face that shoulder ball is what, that big, so you don't have to go through the shoulder ball to get to the goodies. I mean, there's tons of goodies. I mean, you might need to shoot through the shoulder blade. That's a whole different thing than the shoulder ball.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, no matter even what you're saying you've got equipment and setup that will take on even that, and I think that's amazing. But for everybody else, and I don't think unless they're going to go get all this just like this, I wouldn't be shooting for the ball of the shoulder, because you're likely not going to penetrate that.
Most setups.
Yeah. No. Yes.
But
I mean, even a bullet won't do it sometimes, depending on the size of the bullet and stuff. So what he is saying is that if you hide from the shoulder blade, you're eliminating most of the goodies. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a good bit of lung still, but there's a lot of stuff there that if you can shoot through the shoulder blade, that's a whole different conversation. And
Well, let's think about how hard that broadhead is compared to a bullet or any other piece of metal or projectile that we're sending at an animal.
Well, the problem with the bullet a lot of times is so fast it explodes.
Exactly. And here's another thing too, is that energy retention. I want to have, this deer is going to die. This animal needs to die by hemorrhaging.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to kill him, not the impact of the shot as much per se, like a bullet.
Yes, not shock.
Yes. So like a lot of times, I remember we was getting ready for that Yukon hunt back in 21, and I remember we done a lot of long range shooting that year with our rifles, and I remember reading and everybody saying the perfect shot or perfect setup would be that bullet to go through the animal and hang up on the hide on the other side, where he absorbs every ounce of energy plus the damage. Now, agree or disagree.
That's what my partitions do.
I understand,
every time.
but that's not what a bow does. We can't get that kind of energy. We're looking for energy to go through the animal, hemorrhage, and then whatever's left over is left over. I'm not trying to hit it equal. So let's just hypothetically say that we're creating 70 foot-pounds of energy, and it takes 35 to 40 foot-pounds of energy to go through that deer. And we have an arrow that's going to dissipate 40 to 45, 50% or more. Then it's pretty simple to know that arrow's going to stay in that animal.
Mm-hmm.
And you had an equipment failure. Another thing to think about, and this goes back to, I'm going to get thousands of comments beat up, I understand, but this is not based on one or two things. This is not based on opinions. This is based on 20 plus years of these setups performing. Thousands of kills, literally thousands of kills doing this. So I've had them come in the shop and say, hey, I'm shooting X broadhead and I've shot through 3 deer last year. Well, have you ever lost one? Yeah. Have you ever had an arrow stay in? Yeah. Well, then you need to reevaluate your setup. Reevaluate. You had an equipment failure of some point. There's no situation other than shooting a turkey. And that setup that I would do for a turkey is the polar opposite of this. I'd go with a light arrow and a mechanical head because I want it to stay in. If we're shooting an attack event or if we're shooting targets and we're not really hunting, it's going to be a different setup.
So what weight are these broadheads that you like so much?
100. Everything I base on is 100.
He said everything he shoots is 100.
So Tell me about an experience with one of your clients, taking a huge animal with your setup. Can you describe any? I mean, have you had any customers you've booked?
Yeah, looking back over the last few years, I've had guys shoot through Cape Buffalo. I've had them shoot through grizzlies. I've had them shoot through moose. I've had them shoot through caribou. I've had them shoot through many elk. Large game. I hadn't found anything yet.
So in theory, this makes a lot of sense in theory, though.
Physics.
Just
regardless of that, he's going down the path of the greatest degree of accuracy, which is the bottom line, and efficiency that you can get. Right. And then the rest of it, you could argue for days about different things or whether you might hit one there and something stops it possibly or not. The point is, it's like anything, like your job, be the best you can be. And so with a bow, with all these different things going on, it's a pretty complex thing to be the best you can be. And so that's the great thing he's helped achieve. And even, look, let's face it, we can't all take one to his shop. We can't all, but just a little more knowledge, listen to the podcast again, and working on, I've got a little bow shop at the house. I've always tinkered with stuff and learned by trial and error what would work better, but just listening to him today gave me some things I think will help me tremendously. Yeah. Whether he set it up for me or not, I think it helped me understand a couple of things I didn't understand before, but I knew to be true because the results weren't there,
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Look, before I forget, we've got a deal. What we're going to do, we're going to give away one of these new Gamekeeper Edition bows. Ooh. So guys, today they can go to our website and they can sign up, follow directions to sign up for a Gamekeeper Edition bow. And Kenny is going to make a quiver full of arrows that'll balance to that bow.
Man, I want to win those too.
So that's got some pretty good.
Yeah,
that is pretty cool.
Right
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Thank you for.
So we're gonna have to break the rules and let us all apply for it here, right?
Yeah, no, we don't get to win anything.
Or we could just say, you know what, that stays in the closet, and we don't get that way, Bob.
Landy, that's $4,000 or $5,000 sitting next to you.
I know. I'm careful not to bump it here. I'm just looking and wondering what all these buttons do. I've been twisting them and turning them. I hope they don't mess anything up.
Well, Kenny, what do we need to be asking you that we hadn't?
Oh man.
I think we covered the era, the broadhead, the weight of the arrow, all that pretty good.
I can't emphasize enough, your number one priority's got to be the broadhead. It's got to be. And there's not another I'm not trying to sell anything here.
Yeah.
I'm telling you just for the fact of how good they are. And as much, y'all know how much I believe in I've told Bobby for years I believe bottomland and how much I believe in these setups. But one of the best examples I can give you is just last week I had a guy come in that I know in the area. I've known him around home off and on for 25 years. Big bow hunter. You just always kind of hear about him killing big deer here and there. He come by the shop one day and he walked in. He had his bow and he had one arrow and he said, "Kenny, I need you to build me a dozen of these." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "Well, I can't build that dozen." And he said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Well, they hadn't made that arrow in about 15 years." I said, "But I'll be glad to build you some arrows." And he said, "I want them just like that." And it was pretty much the polar opposite of what I build.
Huh.
And I said, "Okay." I said, "So are you deer hunting with these?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I can't build them for you." And he looked at me like I had three eyeballs. And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, I have spent my life and my career growing deer, feeding deer, taking care of deer. And if I let a bow walk out of here that I know the setup's not right, I'm contradicting everything I've ever done for my career. And I love these animals too much to let anybody walk out there and give them a setup that's going to wound them." And that arrow is pretty much the polar opposite. And he said, "Wow." He said, "Well, how about you just explain to me what I need then?" And I said, "Be glad to." So me and him sat down, and I explained to him what I shoot, why I shoot it, and I felt like with the bow that he was shooting at the time, what I would recommend for him. And he said, "Well, if I do that, that means I got to change my sight, don't it?" I said, "Yes, sir, you do. But I'll be glad to sit right out here, and if it takes us all afternoon, I'll stay with you to do it."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I understand." He said, "Can I shoot one of your arrows to kind of see the difference?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. So I got him one of those arrows right there in that quiver, and I think he was shooting at 30 yards. He shot one of his. It went in about 3 or 4 inches. He shot one of mine. It come out the backside and ripped the fletchings off. And he said, "Wow." And I said, "Well, let's look at it differently." So I went and got that practice iron wheel and let him shoot it out of his bow, out of his arrow, and it did not penetrate any more than his field point, even with that broadhead. No momentum.
It's all about the tuning and stuff.
It's all about the momentum. And when he seen that, he was like, "Wow." He said, "Build me some like those." I built him some arrows. Me and him went out and spent 2 hours reciting his bow in. And I mean, I'm not trying to push anything on anybody, but I have the data, I have the facts, and I'm not basing this on opinions. And that gray area of opinions is what most people are relying on because that's what they've heard for 30 years, and that's what they were taught. Well, I want to know why. Well, why? If we're supposed to do this, why? Explain it. And is there better now? Is there availability to do better now?
Right.
And that's why I've dove in and I've spent this kind of time on it.
I know what I'm learning from this is I need to spend a lot more time on my arrows and broadheads than I do because I ain't gonna lie. I go get the one I shot on the bow from 10 years ago and strap it on there and let it rip.
Well, a lot of people don't really even tune their bows.
Right.
Because, they fletch them and they shoot these field points and then they go and put something on there that's advertised as flying just like a field point, but they still have an arrow that wobbles tremendously in flight, and the fletching corrects for that, but it doesn't correct for the lack of momentum.
Yeah.
And so
like
you get that bow set up that throws an arrow with that good efficient momentum, you're going to get way better penetration.
And I'm long armed. And the spine, mine's always on the fringe. Is it supposed to be this? Is it supposed to be that? So, and I have just been like, whatever will work. But there's a lot of truth and a lot of
energy retention.
Well, one of the takeaways is I think guys need to spend a little time with their bows, and
arrows
you can
and
learn a lot.
broadheads, yeah.
Taxi made a point earlier about trying some different equipment.
Well, go back. If it seems so complex, you got to be careful, Kenny, because you throw out too much and average person goes, that's just, hey, look, it's too complicated. I just want to go hunting. And they give up on trying. So just think of in terms of every single ounce of energy that bow generates is going right through the exact dead center of that arrow. If you'll at least work towards that, you'll end up so much better off.
Yep.
Problem is like when you start adjusting cams, you really do need to take it to a pro, likely.
But going back to
and they can get out of line.
Oh, for sure.
Easily.
Yeah. Well, a string stretch, you're going to lose your tune anyway. There's a lot of things there
That's right.
That can change.
So what's the average number of shots on this? I know we need to end up pretty quick, but given average strings, let's just don't pick on any one bow company or anyone, but average strings that do stretch, how many shots, because it used to be so many shots to break it in was like 300-400 shots probably.
Right now, I tell everybody give the bow 200 shots to get broke in.
Right.
But the string manufacturers now, the new match strings on the Matthews, the gas strings I love, they're pre-stretched, so we don't really have any issues with them.
Right.
Ambient conditions.
It seems like it'd be so simple to do. Check your bow after 200 or 300 shots, no matter what brand it is, and then it's not even that much trouble to do.
Yeah, but then after that, we let them roll.
That's right.
I've got bows with 10,000 shots that after we initially checked them after the 200, they still ain't moved. But again, it's a quality of strings. Life on the strings, I think it's depending on not necessarily how many shots, but what kind of conditions you're keeping them in.
Yeah.
I've had strings wear out after 10,000 shots, and I've got some that are 40,000 shots.
You know what I found to be the worst thing on all my equipment as far as deteriorating it? Worse, I guess other than some gunmetals and moisture, is just UV light. It's so hard on stuff.
Leaving them in a
crazy.
truck.
Which, think about your skin too. That's a different
So, Kenny,
topic.
is there looking at that bow there, can a guy take a silver Sharpie and mark his cams when that thing is tuned up, and everything is right, where he can just glance at it occasionally and know it's still tuned? Is there some trick that you can tell us?
So on most bows today, on the cams, will have some type of timing marks. And if you'll look at those, Toxie, where the cables go through the cam on the side, there's small circles in them, and those cables need to stay in line in those circles. So a lot of bow manufacturers are doing that now. You'll see where the cable goes through the cam there; it'll be dead in line. So, and it's on the top and bottom, so it'll let you know on the control cable and the bus cable on different manufacturers, of course. But so most of these manufacturers are putting some kind of timing marks now on there. So you can mark if you want, but we've got enough. Another good measurement too is that you can measure your ATA with a tape measure on those screws that go through the axles, and that should be on this bow 29.5. So know what your axle to axle length needs to be. If your axle to axle length is long and your timing marks are off, it's probably because your strings have stretched.
Yeah. Mac is still holding that Gamekeeper bow back. How long has it been now, Mac?
10 minutes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But Toxie, nice. I try to, you asked a while ago about getting it complicated. I try to keep it as simple as possible in my shop, because one thing early on too I wanted to do is I didn't want to be another bow shop that had bukus of choices on inventory and leave it up to the customer to not know what he needs and just pick something wrong.
Right. Well, Kenny, we always enjoy having you. You always
100%.
got some really interesting insight into things. You're very, you go out and test and try. I believe that.
Yeah, this is a good one. This will make you think, Yes.
Yeah. So, and I'm pretty sure that NDA, there was National Deer Association. I'm pretty sure I'm right because I wrote it down. The recovery rate on fixed broadheads was 82.3 on 1,100 people that surveyed, and 90.7. So they're pretty close to each other.
I'd like to see how many of them are iron wheels.
Well, I don't know that, but. So, guys, y'all watch for that quarter and away shot. Look for that, unless you're shooting Kenny's setup. You got Kenny's setup.
I think the number one problem, Carson used to say this, that's another good little old saying, is like the biggest issue with failure in archery or bow hunting is when you have a loose nut between the grip and the release.
Mm-hmm. There is no
That'll always happen.
That loose nut will cause more problems than anything else.
And that's me. I don't know why. I can practice and know how everything I know I'm supposed to do it right, and I get in the tree stand and a deer walks up and I lose my mind.
Yeah,
Every
but
time.
That's good. You know what?
That's why you're doing it, though.
That's right.
One
Yeah.
leg will start shaking, and then I'll lock it down, and then my whole body
There's
will start
nothing
shaking.
as much as I love turkey hunting, I don't get as tore up turkey hunting as I do bow hunting.
And when you can hear them crunching the acorns,
Oh, yeah.
you know you're close. You know something good's.
I've always been fine till I shoot. Then after I shoot is
You get
when
to
I-
break down.
You know,
the
I've
old
been,
shape.
I haven't been too bad, except, after I shoot, if I question myself, I'm not sure, but it's like if I have to wait a long time, and it doesn't matter if it's a 150-inch deer or a big old doe, if I have to wait a long time
to get the shot.
if I see one, he's walking, he's moving, he's coming, I'm getting ready, and it all goes down pretty quick, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. But if I have to wait a long time, oh my gosh, I still remember leaving work a long time ago, hunting out at Cottrell Lake, and I killed for around here, a pretty nice 8-point, and was back to work right before dark. A few people were still there. I was so proud. I don't think I ever did that before. But I remember the deer was feeding in some water oaks and took like an hour to get to me. And I was completely a nervous wreck before I could get a shot. I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital.
Yeah, in that situation, I usually just look. I can't allow myself to look at the deer.
Don't
Do
look
not
at
make eye
but
contact.
that's just as bad, So
Bob Dixon used to say on deer, and he had a great one, a bunch of great sayings. I mean, you could just do a whole thing on him. But he'd say, once the green light goes off, never look at the horns again. There's no reason to. If you made a decision, it's a shooter, it's not a shooter, whatever. If you made a decision, it's a shooter. To quit looking at the horns. I mean, no matter how tempting it is, do not look at the horns anymore. That's a pretty good rule.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've all got to learn how to kind of go on autopilot too, because there's a lot going on in your mind when that deer comes up there. Yeah. Kenny, we've enjoyed it. Mac, you got anything to add there? Guys, go check out the Country Roots. I'm telling you, it's a great looking pattern.
It is. It really is.
It certainly is. And look, I want to say thank y'all for listening to the podcast. We appreciate it so much. Don't forget the television show on Tuesday nights. Richie works really hard on that. The Gamekeepers of Mossy Oak, 8 o'clock Central Time.
Central Time.
Yeah, what time would that be, Lanny?
On Eastern, that would be 9 o'clock.
There you
Eastern.
go. You can't, Lanny.
Y'all think Kenny's sharp.
Yeah.
You think these broadheads are sharp. Look at Lanny. So. All right, guys. Dudley, what you got?
Please leave a review.
Yeah, we need the reviews. We
and
appreciate it.
that's how you win prizes.
Oh,
That's
this
right.
is true.
And don't forget, go sign up for this Gamekeeper bow with some arrows custom made by Kenny Thompson.
So will there be a link in the show notes they can find
Yes,
that?
there will.
Oh, sweet.
Jason McKellar
Kenny,
put
can
that
I get an appointment with you before this podcast airs?
Yeah, for
Absolutely,
real.
Dudley.
Because I'm
Yeah.
scared I'll never be able to get in the door again after
Absolutely.
this.
And we do ship arrows all over the place. So I can get the information from what bow and create, figure out the energy and build some arrows for you. So
Yeah.
Sweet.
Excellent.
All right, guys, that sounds great. Thank you for everybody for listening, and we look forward to doing this again. So why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Cleve.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.